Hi, I'm back. I'm back to tell you about my favorite books of the year. Was my last video my favorite books of the year as well? Yes. I'm not really good at making videos, it turns out. Like, I always come back for the favorite books video, but other than that, I keep starting lots and lots of videos and never finishing them. One day, this will be a real channel, mark my words, but for now, you're getting my iconic favorite books of the year video again. No, I'm kidding. It's not that iconic. I'm not that good of a video maker as we established, but I want to tell you about my favorite books, and I'm gonna tell you about my favorite books. I had a great reading year, like amazing. I read more favorite books this year than I ever have before, I think. And I also read more books than I ever have before. I've read 51 books. My record was 50, so I exceeded that by one. Not that it matters, but it made me happy. Yeah, and why not jump right in? I have lots of books to tell you about, 12 in fact. So let's start. There's loads of like repeating authors on this list, because I do have my favorites and they're just amazing. I'm gonna tell you about them. Let's start with one. I read Fangirl Volume 1 and 2, the manga. It's not really a manga, but the manga this year. And it was amazing. Fangirl is one of my favorite books of all time, like truly top 3 books of all time. This story, it connects with me so deeply. It's so beautiful. Every time I revisit this story, it just finds me in the perfect place. Fangirl is a story about Kath. Kath is going to college and she has a social anxiety disorder, really struggles. She has a twin, but the twin doesn't really want anything to do with her now that they're in college, so she struggles with that as well. And she gets assigned a roommate, Reagan, and Reagan has a friend who Kath kind of bonds with, Levi, and it's kind of their story. It's a love story, but it's much more than that. It's about Kath's anxiety, it's about coming of age, it's about your first year in college and how miserable that can be. And it's beautiful. Again, like every time I read it, it just meets me where I am at, and I just take something new out of it every time. And it's no different with the manga. Yes, the original is obviously so much better, and I don't think they've quite nailed the energy of Levi in the art, but still, it's just amazing, and I feel thrown back into the story every time I read a new volume. And I think that's really what the manga wants to achieve, right? It's for the Fangirl fans, the already established Fangirl fans who want to consume the story in a different way, and does that perfectly, in my opinion. These are in no particular order, by the way. Let's talk about The Anthropocene, reviewed next by John Green. I've read some of John Green's fiction. I never really enjoyed it. I never really liked it. I always wanted to like it so badly, because John Green, I love that man. I love his videos. I love the way he talks about the world. He talks about important issues. He talks about mental health, but it never really translated for me in his fiction. It never really connected with me. But I had high hopes for the non-fiction, because it's much closer to what he does on YouTube, or what he it's just much closer to him talking, because it basically is him talking. This book is the book version of a podcast he did, and it's basically just him rating stuff like sunsets or Dr. Pepper, random stuff. But it's also him just talking about the meaning of life and talking about mental health and doing that so beautifully. So beautifully. Really, finally, I can agree with all the people who say John Green does mental health rap like nobody else. I really felt seen in the Harvey essay when he talked about like hitting rock bottom, for lack of a better term. And I cried about a random football game that I didn't even know existed because he made it about so much more than being a random football game. I'm I'm getting emotional right now talking about it. It's just such a beautiful book, and I could listen to him talk about anything and everything for the rest of my life. I wish I had like an endless John Green audiobook of him just talking about stuff. So yeah, I'm so glad I finally enjoyed a John Green book because I really do think he's great. Okay, next, The Sunbearer Trials. It's such an amazing book, and also look at the cover. Oh my god, so beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful covers I have ever seen in my life, and the screen doesn't even do it justice. It has gold foiling. It's amazing. Anyway, the inside also amazing. The Sunbearer Trials is about Teo. He's a trans boy and he's also a jade, which is a kind of god, but not as high of a god as other gods in this Aztec-inspired fantasy world. And there's trials, I think, every 10 years or something. There's trials where kids kind of have to fight it out, and there's one winner of the trials. The trials are quite dangerous, but the winner is highly rewarded, and it's kind of to keep the peace of the world we're in. It's similar to Hunger Games, but again, not similar at all. Like, the book is something completely different, but like the concept you can kind of compare to Hunger Games. And it's such a beautiful book. And Teo doesn't really think he's gonna get chosen because Jades really don't get chosen for the trials. I think like in the history of the trials there's only been like a couple of Jades who have been chosen in the hundreds and hundreds of years it's been going on. So he doesn't really think anything when he goes to the ceremony. It's just something that he has to do. But then obviously you can imagine what happens next. And it's such a beautiful book. It's so beautiful. The romance is everything. I rooted so hard. I just want them to have their little happy ending, just them watching baking videos and just eating candy because I love them so much. I want them to be happy. And the stakes were so high. I was so hooked to the story, and I'm not really a plot girly at all, but I was for this book. I was so hooked, and I can't wait to read Celestial Monsters. I haven't read it yet because my mom is just as obsessed with the book as I am, and she ordered the second book, but like it came out 1 week before I had to leave for England. I'm in England right now for semester abroad. It's so amazing, but I have to go soon. Anyway, my mom ordered it and I couldn't read it before I had to go, and I obviously couldn't take it away with me, away from my mom who ordered it. So I'm just gonna read it when I'm back end of January, but I'm so excited to read it. I need to know my babies are safe and it's all gonna be good. And people have been loving Celestial Monsters as well, so I have no doubts that I will as well. Next is another fantasy. I loved a lot of fantasy this year, which is not always the case for me. I'm usually not that much of a fantasy reader, but this year I was really picking up good fantasy. I read Tress of the Emerald Sea this year. It's my first Brandon Sanderson, and I absolutely adored it. It felt so nostalgic. But let me tell you what it's about. I always forget to tell you what it's about first. So it's about Tress. She lives on a very, very small, isolated island. And the people who live on the island can't really leave the island. They aren't allowed to, and they really don't have many ambitions to anyway. And she's in love with the prince of the island, I think. I'm not sure about his title, but basically the prince of the island. But she's only like window cleaner. And when the father of the prince finds out, he sends him away. And in the beginning, that's fine. Tress knows that the prince is safe, but something happens and she doesn't receive any messages anymore, and she has reason to believe that the prince is not safe anymore. So she reluctantly leaves her life on the island, her comfortable life that she never intended to leave, to save her prince. And it's such a beautiful story. Again, it feels nostalgic even though I've never read it before. It's just one of those classic, funny, cozy fantasy stories, one that you would listen to as a child or read as a child, or yeah, it just gives you warm and fuzzy feelings. And it's not all stakeless, not at all. It has really high stakes, and it had me gasping and sitting on the edge of my seat to find out what happens. But it's really all about the quirky characters. It's about the warmth the book exudes, even though there's like rough things happening and there's danger and everything. And it's just so beautiful, and it has so much heart, it has so much tenderness, it's so written with so much love. I think it's quite well known that Brandon Sanderson wrote this book for his wife, and I think you can really tell that this was written with like love, as an act of love, and it's so beautiful. It really is. And I know Brandon Sanderson's writing is quite different in his other books, also I've heard, but I'm still kind of want to try the other things now. I think I'm gonna start with Skyward, but recommend me your favorite Brandon Sanderson. Now let's get to probably my favorite author of all time. I'm currently working myself through their backlist. I want to read everything they have ever written. It's Alice Oseman. She's amazing. I just can't thank her enough for the representation she brings into the mainstream. The fact that she brings a romantic rap into the mainstream it means so much to me. Like every time I read a book of hers where there's a rap, or I watch Heartstopper and I see Isaac, it's everything. When Isaac said, you can just Google it, kind of changed my life. It really did. The rap is so perfect, and they do it with so much care and so beautifully and tender, and found family is always at the center of their stories. Anyway, I haven't even talked about a specific book yet. I read this year Nick and Charlie, Heartstopper Volume 5 and Radio Silence. Let's talk about Nick and Charlie and Heartstopper Volume 5 first. I'm sure you're all aware of Heartstopper. Heartstopper is the story of Nick and Charlie. It's the story of two teenage boys who fall in love and who navigate that and are messy teenage boys and have mental health issues and have friends who have problems, and but also have joy in their lives and love in their lives. And I just Alice Oseman's stories feel so real. They feel so like real life. Like when she talks about teenagers, like you feel like you're back being a teenager, and it's so beautiful. It captures an energy like no one else can capture an energy. It's just stunning, and Nick and Charlie will forever be in my heart, whether it be in the novella or the graphic novel or the show. They're all perfect. They're all wonderful and perfect. And Radio Silence, this book. Oh. First of all, huge trigger warnings. Please look up the trigger warnings. Nobody told me how fucking sad this book was going to be and what it was going to cover. It just, take care of yourself. Radio Silence is about a teenage girl who's very much an academic overachiever. She's really the top of her class. She's head girl. She's on the best trajectory for the best universities. She doesn't really have friends or any social life, and she has this one thing out of school that she loves, which is this podcast. And she's a fangirl of this podcast and of the creator, but the creator is anonymous. And we kind of follow her story, possibly coming into contact with the creator. And there's so much more to it, but I also don't really want to spoil anything. It's so intricate and complicated while also being such a story out of real life. Like I said, Alice Oseman's stories always are. This made me feel so deeply, and it made me feel so represented, like all of Oseman's stories. I love the casual representation in her books, and such an important story and such a good book. And I'm not doing it justice right now. I'm not, but read it. Please, read it. Read Alice Oseman. Their books are everything. Really, they are. My favorite classic of the year. One of my favorite classics of all time. In fact, maybe my favorite classic of all time. Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights. I read it for the first time this year. And what a book. What a book, right? Oh my god, where even to start? Wuthering Heights is set in the Yorkshire Moors, very, very isolated. There's only kind of 2 estates there, and they're quite far apart as well, but like in those times, neighbors. It's about abuse basically, and the cycle of abuse, and a tragic love story. But you shouldn't go into this thinking it's a romance. It's really not. But it is about tragic love in a way, and hate, and every feeling that's so deep. Everything is so dramatic in this book, but it has a reason to. Everything is so harsh. Even the atmosphere is so harsh. The Yorkshire Moors, so harsh in winter, and the feelings as well. It's so, you see those characters destroying themselves and the other characters, and you feel for them while also hating them, and you understand why they're doing it, but you also don't condone it at all. You just you feel so deeply in this book. I felt so deeply in this book, and obviously we all know the "my soul was the same as yours" quote thing, but like there's another quote which goes, "I have not broken your heart, you have broken it, and by breaking it, you have broken mine." And I think that's just the whole book summed up. And it's so, if you read the book, you know how that's the book. And it's so amazing. And I was so miserable reading it, because really it's so bleak. It's so dark. It's so bleak. But I also had, in a weird way, such a good time, because I was so immersed in this book. I felt so deeply everything I was reading. Amazing. Just an amazing read. And I'm so sad that you didn't publish any other novels. But yeah, this book, amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. And if you're a Folkmore girly or Hosier girly who hasn't read this book yet, what are you doing? This is for you. This is your classic. Go read it now. Let's get to one of my favorite authors as well. My favorite romance author, maybe, Talia Hibbert. I read 2 books of hers this year and they were both perfect. No, that's that's untrue. I read 3 books of hers and they were all good. They were all amazing. But there's 2 which really stood out to me. That's Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute, and Take a Hint, Dani Brown. Let's start with Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute, which is so unfairly cute. I really shouldn't say the subtle anymore. I messed it up so many times. This book, it's about Celine and Brad, and they're amazing. They're both in secondary school. Celine is quite the academic overachiever. Celine is a very ambitious girl. She wants to get into a kind of survival program because she thinks it's really going to boost her CV for uni. She has a kind of childhood friend slash rival. Now it's definitely her rival, Brad, who isn't as much of an academic overachiever, but he's worried about his future as well. So he applies for this survival program as well. And at the end of it, there's a winner, and the winner, I think, gets a lot of money and a lot of opportunities. So they're both kind of already butting heads, already kind of rivals in that sense again. But they fall in love. And it's so sweet. I love Celine so much. Celine is such a beautiful character. She's so flawed, but she's so real, and I love her. And the way this love story, it's so tender, it's so sweet, it's so full of love, which is stupid to say about a love story, but not every love story is, honestly. Not every romance book is full of love, but this one is, and it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's the way Brad has OCD and the way Celine treats him when it's about his OCD. Even if they're in a really bad place, even if they're fighting a lot in this book. They're really, at the beginning, can't really stand each other. But when it's about his OCD, she's so tender and caring, and she doesn't care in which place they are. She cares. She helps him. And that sounds like the bare minimum, and it is. But the way she does in this book, you would understand if you read it. It's so beautiful. It's so, sure they butt heads, sure they're angry at each other, but they never go beyond a certain point. They never cross a line. They're so beautifully nice to each other. And that sounds so stupid to say about a love story, but it really is something precious. Their love story is so precious. Take a Hint, Dani Brown. Oh my god. Probably my favorite adult romance. It's stunning. It's about Dani, who does a PhD at a uni, and she has kind of a flirt going with the security guard of this uni building she teaches in. And one day he kind of saves her from this building and it goes viral, and they decide to fake dates after that. And it's so beautiful. It has incredibly anxiety wrap. It's, again, the guy, he's so sweet, so tender, so beautiful. He loves Dani so deeply. Talia Hibbert knows how to write, and the story is so funny as well. I laughed out loud all the time, and I was kicking my feet, not metaphorically speaking. I was kicking my feet in bed reading this book, and the other one as well. It just, Talia Hibbert, The Woman You Are. Truly, the woman you are. The last book is a German book that hasn't been translated into English, unfortunately, so I'm only gonna mention it really quick. It's my favorite book of the year. It's Deutschland schafft mich by Michael Abdullahi. It's a book about the political situation in Germany. It's a book about racism, it's a book about fascism, and it's an incredibly important book that I think every person living in Germany should read, especially now, especially before the next votes. It's looking quite grim right now. It's looking quite hopeless. Even the best case scenario for the next votes kind of scares me. So please, if you live in Germany, please read this book. It's so important. So important. Abdullahi doesn't shy away from facing the facts, and I think people need to hear them. So that's it. Those were my favorite books of 2024. Thank you for watching. Even though I only upload this one video a year, I'm still gonna try this year again to upload more videos, but we'll see. I'll see you later next year for the next favorite books video. Thank you for watching. Bye.